There's been a number of concerns related to Muskrat Falls. What's the focus of this inquiry?
I think, the announcement that came today is very much focused on the financial questions here. I mean, this is a project, when it was announced under the previous Conservative government, provincial government, it was $5 billion and it went to $6 billion, and today sits at $12.7 billion. And so I think the question is, like, how did the cost run so high? Like, what happened? And so you heard Premier Ball, Dwight Ball, say, this is a project we inherited. He's very much looking back to decisions that were made by the previous government. What's happening at Nalcor Energy, that's the Crown Corporation in charge of the project. And so there's going to be a look, possibly even a forensic audit, which is something people have been asking for, to see, why is this costing so much? Why is it behind schedule? And that's a big question, because this is a project that could bankrupt this province, right? I mean, the ratepayers have to pay for this eventually, and today they said electricity could double in cost for people in Newfoundland and Labrador by the year 2022. So there's some big financial questions, and that really seemed to be the focus of what was said today.
Will Indigenous concerns be reflected?
It's hard to say, because while the financial concerns and costs, that was what was talked about today, for Indigenous people, and I've covered this story a lot over the last 2 years, the Indigenous concerns are very much about the environment, about health and culture. And so, methyl mercury is an overriding concern. It's a toxin that gets just sort of naturally created when you flood trees and topsoil, but it can contaminate fish. So you're talking about Arctic char and salmon and seal, and so people are worried about their way of life, and there's no sort of price tag that you can put on that. And so some of the reaction I saw on social media, people were a little bit like, oh, this is just politicking, and these aren't the answers that they're looking for. They wish that the project could be stopped or paused while these answers are sought. The Premier did say, because he was asked about that during a press conference, and he did say that he is working with Indigenous leaders. They have an expert advisory committee that's looking at the methyl mercury issue, but it just hasn't been enough. Like, people haven't heard anything, that there hasn't been an outcome yet. So people are still waiting for answers, and meanwhile the project is sort of trucking along. Now, the focus of the inquiry is one thing, but it is broad. He did say that, and the public can participate in this. They can apply to speak to the inquiry, and there is a section in the terms of reference that does include the involvement of Indigenous leaders. So people will have their chance, and I'm sure that people in Labrador will take that opportunity to make sure that their concerns are put forward.
Well, there's a lot happening in Labrador this week. Trudeau is heading there to make an apology to residential school survivors. So how does this all tie together?
I think for Indigenous people, for Innu and Inuit in Labrador, there's sort of this overriding, there's all this talk around reconciliation, and that's a big part of obviously why Trudeau is going. The Innu and Inuit, they weren't part of that, of Harper's apology back in 2008. So now Trudeau is going, and they're going to get an apology for what happened to them in residential schools, and that's about reconciliation. But people are like, apologies and words are one thing, but they want to see action, and they feel that when it comes to a project like Muskrat Falls, when it comes to the economic decisions that get made, sometimes that's where they don't see reconciliation. That's where Indigenous concerns don't come to the forefront like they should. So some people have been sort of, Trudeau's coming, but what about Muskrat Falls? And so for them, it's very much tied together. Now, Carolyn Bennett is meeting with the Labrador Land Protectors in a sharing circle this week. So they're sort of starting that conversation. But at this point, it is a conversation. I think that all along, Indigenous people have been looking for action. And at this point, it's apologies and words. But that still has meaning. So I think people are looking forward to it. But people are very wary. It's a very big political issue, an economical issue, and we'll see where it goes. The inquiry will be interesting to watch as it unfolds.
All right. Thank you so much for this today, Trina.
Thank you, Juanita.